Okay, so my presentation is going to be about, is AI impacting metagames? And to start off, I'm just going to be talking about what a metagame is, and that's the strategy that most people generally agree upon to be the best way to play and win a game. So I'm going to focus on both chess and Dota 2. The reason why I picked chess is because it's a 1,000-year-old game with predefined set of actions and a well-defined environment that's conceptually clean but also computationally challenging. And also, the games remained virtually unchanged throughout the ages, so it's a pretty good case study. Dota 2, on the other hand, came out in 2013, and the users have full control of their characters in multiple dimensions, unlike chess, which is two-dimensional. uh, as well as the game hasn't, or the game does change with every patch, which means that there's potentially new mechanics and characters to take into account every single few months or so. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit of background on chess and AI. So in 1997, IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer defeated world champion Garry Kasparov by a 4-2 margin in a 6-game series. And since then, every single smartphone has had the capability of running chess engines that can defeat current chess grandmasters and current world champions pretty easily too. So we can see by both these pictures that on the left side we have chess engines and their ELO rating, and then on the right side we have the current top chess players, or also in history too. And we can see that there's about 1,000 ELO difference between the two, which is pretty good for the chess engine. So moving on, I'm going to talk about how AI has been changing the way that we play chess. So chess engines can analyze every move from a particular position up until a certain depth, and they can play the statistical best move at that position. They don't have any emotions, which means that their judgment won't be clouded by anything, especially in situations like recovering after a blunder, which can be particularly hard for a human chess player. And one particular strategy that AI systems have emphasized in recent years is that maintaining pressure on an opponent until they blunder may be a much more advantageous strategy than many people realize. So a defensive style is actually better than an offensive style in many cases. Also, since the engine can determine the best move up until a certain depth, many top players and coaches extensively analyze particular positions and moves using chess engines in order to improve their play. So AI isn't only helping the top echelon of players, it's also helping the general subset of players that are just trying to figure out what's the best move to make in their current position. And it's also potentially changing the meta as well by coming up with different strategies like the one where we prioritize pressure over aggression. So I do want to cover Deep Blue's implementation, but I'm not really going to go in detail here because a lot of it is in my paper. What I do want to talk about is Deep Blue's AI software really has three key elements, which is an evaluation function, a search algorithm, and two databases, which are all things that we've learned in our AI class already. But the modern implementations are a little bit different. So we can kind of see Deep Blue as a manually calibrated value function, and that's because the developers do manually calibrate the value functions. And despite beating the world champion, Deep Blue isn't very sophisticated because every single time that it needs to be improved, it has to be manually calibrated. Uh, on a modern approach, we have things like AlphaZero, which are general forms of game engines that use reinforcement learning. So not only can AlphaZero beat modern chess grandmasters, but it can also beat grandmasters in the game of Go, which is another 1,000-year-old board game. So reinforcement learning allows us to utilize a more powerful way and a more general way of playing 2D games or games that are similar to each other. So nowadays, a lot of chess engines and chess programs can evaluate your play. They can also calculate optimal moves. They can annotate your games, and they can provide feedback for improving. And this really kind of pushed the chess community to another level because back in the day, in the 1800s and 1900s, all you could do is look up chess books from top grandmasters, but now we have a lot more tools at our disposal. Moving on to Dota 2, so OpenAI 5 is a Dota 2 AI engine that was created by OpenAI as a research platform for general purpose AI systems. It was able to achieve expert level performance and learn human and AI cooperation through a cooperative mode that they added into the game. And OpenAI was also able to beat two-time world champions OG in back-to-back games, becoming the first AI to beat world champions in an esports game. So it was a pretty monumental achievement. Before I move on to how OpenAI 5 has impacted Dota 2 and how pro players play the game, I just want to give a little bit of background on how Dota 2 works. So, in Dota, earning gold by killing minions or champions allows characters to buy items and become stronger. And since AI has frame perfect reaction time, it's able to maximize these parameters at a superhuman level. The professionals that played against the AI really noted how it had done things that they've never seen before. So teams started studying the AI and the way that it was allocating resources, especially. A member of the championship winning team, OG, even commented about how team dynamics and in game collaboration was the bottleneck in resource allocation, and how the AI didn't really have this issue since it was able to collaborate with itself in milliseconds or microseconds, and therefore they were able to study some patterns in resource allocation, which made teams a lot more cohesive and dynamic, therefore becoming more efficient. And similar to chess, the Dota 2 AI learned to prioritize pressuring its opponents. So, members of OG again commented about how they had conversations on how the AI took a different approach to fighting and pressuring, and how they can learn from that. They also noted how these skills in fighting and pressuring they haven't seen from other humans in the past before. So the professionals acknowledge that there are behaviors that the AI makes that are impossible to mimic, but that there's important lessons in both resource management and aggression that could improve the overall play of any player, whether it be professional or casual. So once again, I'm not going to go really too much into detail about the implementation of OpenAI 5, but I do want to say that it does use self-play reinforcement learning to achieve superhuman performance. And they did this by having the AI play over 10,000 years of games against itself and learning from batches of approximately 2 million frames every 2 seconds. The policy that was used to determine rewards and maximize the probability of winning the game is trained using the proximal policy optimization algorithm. And the biggest challenge that the developers were faced was not their implementation of the specific policy or their specific neural networks, but rather the ever-evolving state of the game, which is updated regularly through online game patches and which can change in-game environments, especially other champions and itemization as well. And finally, I just want to reinforce my thesis and touch on the idea that general AI concepts such as reinforcement learning can be used for a broad spectrum of problems, from two-dimensional board games to a five-on-five multi-dimensional strategy game. So AI is quickly improving, and with these new techniques, we can build AI systems that expose fundamental truths in the games that we're playing, which players can learn from and shape their understanding of how to play the game. So, whether I think AI is impacting metagames, I do think so. I think that's the case. And even if it's not a monumental shift in the overall strategy of the game, it is enough to see real benefits and allow current players to reach all time peaks. So that's really just a general outline of what I'm doing, and I'm just going to be going into a lot more depth in my written paper.